Unexpectedly, for 8 months on a military mission gone wrong, 28-year-old Jordan Thompson finally returned home to be reunited with his beloved golden retriever Simba. But this reunition was not as joyful as Jordan had hoped. He quickly notices something about Simba that brings tears to his eyes. As soon as the plane touched down, Jordan rushed towards the exit. He wasn't going to let anything or anybody stop him from seeing Simba after so long. He just hoped that the dog was there waiting for him. After everything Jordan had been through, he just wanted to hug Simba for hours on end. Much to Jordan's excitement, Simba was indeed there waiting for him. But the usually very excitable dog didn't react as Jordan expected. The golden retriever stayed very still and calm when he saw Jordan. He seemed nervous and shy. Had Simba maybe forgotten about him after he'd been away for so long? It was only when Jordan got closer that he noticed something what exactly was different, and he couldn't contain his tears anymore. He wept into Simba's fur, hoping it wasn't true. But before we start, smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our upcoming stories. Jordan was a military man through and through. He was a specialist in his field, working as a military contractor for short placements, applying his skills until he was no longer needed and then returning home. He often worked from home too, which meant he got to spend lots of time with his best friend. Despite Jordan's unique schedule, he was still a military man. This meant occasionally going on missions to some very dangerous places. This also meant leaving Simba behind. But each time Jordan left for some new, high-risk place, he always promised Simba that he would come back. Remembering his promise to Simba kept Jordan going through each dangerous mission. And this time, it might be what kept him alive. At this point in life, Jordan didn't have any kids and was single, so Simba was his only close contact in life, besides his parents. He and Simba did everything together, hiking, going to local baseball games, hanging out at bars, or playing frisbee fetch at the local parks. The whole neighborhood knew Jordan and Simba well, so it was always sad when Jordan had to go away. For most missions, Jordan was only gone for about 2 or 3 months. At least, that's the longest he'd been away so far. Whenever he went away, Simba would stay with his parents. So when Jordan received notice that he was being sent on another mission, he began making his usual arrangements for Simba. Jordan asked his parents if they could take Simba for the 6 weeks he was supposed to be away. But his parents informed him that as much as they would love to, but they were going to be away on vacation on those weeks, so couldn't watch Simba. Jordan asked a few of his closest friends who had watched Simba before, but none of them were available. Now Jordan was starting to worry, so he did something different. Jordan asked his friend Jack if he would be willing to keep Simba. Jack hadn't watched Simba before for more than a few hours and was a bit hesitant at first. But he had spent plenty of time with Simba before and figured he could take care of him for a few weeks. After all, Jordan was never gone for more than 2 months. What could go wrong? Jordan said his goodbyes to Simba, leaving him at Jack's house. It was an emotional goodbye for both Jordan and Simba, but Jordan felt confident that Jack would take good care of the gentle, friendly dog. Simba seemed happy enough, settling himself into Jack's house as soon as they arrived. Jordan flew out that same day and joined his new, temporary unit for the mission. For the first 2 weeks, the mission was going well. Jordan was able to make a few calls back home via satellite phone during that time. About 3 weeks in, Jordan called Jack again to check in on Simba, only this time there wasn't good news from home. Jordan was horrified to hear that Simba had apparently run away from Jack while the two were out on a hike. Jack, along with most of the neighborhood, was out searching for him right now. The usually calm dog had apparently got spooked and bolted off in a forest near Jack's home. Jack had called in friends and the local rangers to help with the search, but no one had seen Simba yet. Jack apologized over and over, promising Jordan that he would find Simba no matter what, but Jordan couldn't help but worry. What if Simba had gotten hurt? Or worse, his job demanded his full attention at all times, and despite the fear swirling in his head, this time would be no different. But even as he worked, Jordan couldn't help but think of Simba. Simba had never run off before, which made Jordan worry all the more. And for him to run off in a forest was even worse. Forests were dangerous places full of hidden pits, old hunting traps, and wild animals. Jordan had no idea what he would do if something happened to Simba while he was away overseas. As long as Simba was waiting for him, Jordan knew everything would be okay. But with Simba missing, Jordan was suddenly not so confident. All this worrying would come to cost him in a major way. One night, while accompanying his unit on a dangerous operation, Jordan got sloppy. He hadn't slept well the past few nights, thinking of Simba, still lost and alone. A few seconds of being thrown off balance would cost Jordan months of freedom. He stumbled, setting off a security sensor. In just a few minutes, the group was overrun by the enemy and taken captive. Jordan, thankfully, wasn't hurt too badly, but there was no chance his captors were going to let him go. For the next 8 months, Jordan didn't see sunlight. He didn't leave his cramped concrete cell except for a 10-minute walk around a slightly larger concrete room, watched at all times by armed guards. The enemy had high demands for Jordan's release. They wanted a lot, and of course, Jordan was worth it. Unfortunately, much to his horror, Jordan's superiors didn't see it that way. They weren't even willing to discuss terms for release, making the situation a complete stalemate. Jordan lived in fear every day and felt extremely lucky that he was treated fairly well. Sure, the food was bad and he was slowly going insane shut inside for so long, but he'd heard of prisoners of war being beaten daily, tortured, or even killed. At least he got 2 meals a day and a decent enough place to sleep. It could have been a lot worse given the circumstances. Jordan wasn't only worried about his own situation though. His nights were spent staring at the stained ceiling, worrying about Simba. After his capture, there was no way he could contact Jack to find out if Simba had been found or not. Any calls made to his superiors as part of the proposed prisoner exchange were made without him present. And so Jordan worried and worried. Was Simba still lost? Was he alone? If Simba was still missing, had Jack reported it to the police or the neighborhood watch? There were many reasons that could have kept Jordan up at night, but Simba was the only thing on his mind. Jordan wondered if he would ever see Simba again. There in that cell, he promised himself that if he ever got out and was reunited with Simba, that he would never take on another mission and would never leave Simba alone again. 8 months passed and things weren't looking good for Jordan. He started to get sick from being inside for so long in the dirty cell. He'd seen other members of his unit who had been captured, but they weren't allowed to talk to each other. However, they all knew the situation was dire. If their superiors couldn't come to an agreement with the enemy for their release, they'd likely never see their homes or families again. But in the end, Jordan's superiors hadn't forgotten about him or his unit. Instead of negotiating, they had spent the past 8 months putting together a specially trained squad and dropping them into the area to take over the enemy camp. So Jordan was awoken one night by the sound of gunfire in the prison, and soon enough, someone was at his door to let him out. He was free. The special squad quickly made sure Jordan and the other prisoners were evacuated to safety, airlifting them out to the nearest Air Force base. The enemy were neutralized and all the prisoners successfully rescued. Finally, after almost a year of confinement, Jordan was able to relax in the military hospital. He even had a window and could see the sky and the grass, but there was only one thing on his mind. The doctors told Jordan he lost weight and stamina over the months and would need to carefully nurse his body back to health. As soon as he got to the base, Jordan asked for a phone to call home. His superiors wouldn't have it. They said that his parents had been informed of his rescue, but for now he was ordered to rest. Once that was completed, they wanted to debrief him. Only after that would he be allowed to contact his friends and family at home. Jordan didn't want to, but he did as he was ordered. As soon as his debrief was over, Jordan was allowed to make a phone call. He immediately called his parents, letting them know he was safe and coming home soon. Then, Jordan called Jack to find out if Simba had been found. To his relief, Jack told him that Simba had been found 2 days after the original phone call. Jordan felt his eyes fill with tears of relief. He was beyond happy and couldn't wait to get home. Jack told Jordan that once his parents had heard about Jordan's capture, they had insisted on taking Simba in. At that point, the golden retriever was the only connection they had to their son. But despite this good news, Jordan couldn't help but find something strange. If Simba was living with his parents, why hadn't they told him that when he'd called earlier? On the surface, it all seemed like good news, but there was definitely something wrong. Jordan couldn't exactly tell what it was, but Jack hadn't sounded like his normal self on the phone. His tone was stressed and hurried. He was holding something back. But what were Jack and his parents not telling him? Jordan couldn't help but wonder. Too soon, Jordan had to end the call, but he found himself back in his bed in the hospital, staring at a different ceiling this time as he worried about Simba. Jordan was a man to trust his instincts. Right now, they were screaming that something wasn't right. Were his friends and family hiding something about Simba from him because of what he'd been through? Did they not want to cause him more stress? Whatever it was, Jordan knew he needed to get home. He had one more medical checkup before he was able to get clearance to leave. Once he received the all clear and was assigned a flight home, Jordan didn't waste time. He had to see Simba and find out what was wrong. Jordan gathered his equipment that had been brought from the other base, packed his bags, and took the first available flight the Air Force offered him. But there were more problems to come. The flight Jordan needed wasn't as simple as hopping on a commercial plane. His first flight took him from the hidden military base to a larger base in a different country. Then he had to wait for a flight that would take him back home to the States where his family and hopefully Simba were waiting. After 2 long days of pacing and sleeping, Jordan was able to squeeze onto a cargo plane that was heading for the US that night. The plane was noisy and dusty, and there were definitely no in-flight movies here, but Jordan was willing to suffer through it if it meant he could get home quicker. It felt incredible to step onto US soil for the first time in months as he stepped off the plane, but Jordan still wasn't home. He still had one more short flight across the country to get back to the military base in his home county. It all felt like far too long to wait, but Jordan knew there wasn't another option. The final stretch of the journey felt like it would never end. And yet, Even though Jordan had spent hundreds of hours dreaming of the moment he would get to see his parents and precious Simba again, he found himself suddenly feeling nervous. There was a part of him that didn't want to wait another moment longer than absolutely necessary to see his beloved pet again, but Jordan was also afraid. He didn't know what was waiting for him. The fact that his parents had no problem bringing Simba to greet him at the airport gave Jordan some confidence that everything was okay. He tried to cling on to that feeling, hoping he could maintain it until he finally saw his dog again. The flight was a smooth one, if slightly cramped and loud, but even if it had been quiet, Jordan wouldn't have slept a wink. His mind was way too active thinking about Simba and that fateful day so many months ago when Jack had called him to say that the dog had run away. So much had happened between then and now. Would Simba even remember Jordan? The second supply plane that Jordan had taken for this last stretch of the journey arrived perfectly on time. Before he knew it, Jordan found himself staggering off the plane with his bags in tow. There was no fanfare announcing the arrival of himself and other soldiers on the flight who were returning home, just a dusty stretch of airstrip leading to the buildings of the military base. As Jordan, who was still in his military gear, and the two other soldiers who had been on the flight with him made their way into the reception building, the whole mood of the day changed. Friends, family, and other soldiers all gathered around, crying and cheering as they welcomed home the survivors of capture. It was all quite overwhelming for Jordan. Only a few days ago he had been shut in the tiny cell he had called home for almost a year. All this noise and thanks and celebration was very intense, but much to Jordan's confusion, he couldn't see his parents or Simba anywhere. Leaving the reception building, he quickly started to make his way toward the pickup area. At first it seemed like there was no sign of them there either, but then Jordan heard the barking of a familiar dog and he started sprinting. Mounting panic halted as soon as he saw his parents running toward him from the car park. They were both openly weeping, matching the tears running down Jordan's cheeks. The family hugged, reunited after almost a year kept apart, but Jordan could stop himself from looking around for Simba. The golden retriever was hanging back a little, a wary expression on his soft face. Jordan's tears only fell faster as he looked into the big brown eyes of his beloved dog for the first time in 9 months. Simba didn't seem to recognize Jordan. When he carefully walked closer to the dog, Jordan's heart broke as Simba took a few steps back. Jordan looked at his parents for answers, but they were suddenly struggling to look their son in the eye. Simba had needed immediate surgery and it had been touch and go for a while, but the dog made it through. Jordan's parents slowly started to explain the story of what had happened to Simba while Jordan was a prisoner overseas. When Simba had run away in the forest, although he had only been lost for a day or two, during that time he had sustained an injury to one of his eyes that left him almost blind on that side. Simba managed to make a full recovery, but his parents and Jack had agreed to not tell Jordan anything about it until he was home. They wanted to keep anything away from him that could potentially cause stress seeing what Jordan had gone through. Jordan's heart broke, even as his parents assured him that Simba hadn't let the injury slow him down at all, but it might explain why the dog was struggling to recognize Jordan after such a long time apart. But while the family were talking, Simba started cautiously sniffing around Jordan. Jordan got to watch his dog realize that his best friend in whole world had come home. He saw something change in Simba's expression as confusion made way for the purest form of excitement, and Simba jumped into Jordan's arms. In the months following his arrival back home, Jordan finalized his leave from the military and found a job closer to home. He could not live with the prospect of being away from Simba for another extended period of time. Finally, Jordan managed to put Simba back on the ground, and the dog is still jumping with joy all around him. The exhausted but happy man hugged his parents and asked if they could all go home. Simba has had no other medical emergencies, but Jordan still takes his dog to the vet often for simple checkups. The connection that Jordan now has with his dog is like never before, and Jordan is extremely grateful that they both survived their ordeals, coming out the other side stronger than ever. As for Simba, there was a medical document about his condition, treatment, and any further risks waiting for Jordan when he got home. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another unbelievable tale like this one.